Hello, and welcome to Family Talks from Care Visions, conversations that explore what really helps children and young people to thrive. I'm Lucy Johnston, and today we're asking why so many young men and boys are feeling lost, lonely, or drawn to online influencers who've been described as misogynistic and promising strength and success. And what can parents and carers do to help? My guest today is Mark Brooks OBE, one of the leading voices on men's well-being and healthy masculinity, and chair of the Mankind Initiative. Mark, it's an absolute honour to have you here. Welcome to Family Talks.
Thank you very much, Lucy, and the honour is all mine.
Well, it's brilliant to see you. And we'll just start by opening quite broadly. So many parents and carers are saying something feels quite different about how boys are growing up today. And I'm just wondering what you're seeing from your perspective.
Well, from my perspective, I'm seeing a number of influences affecting the lives of young men and boys. I mean, first of all, in terms of their broad education, they're not doing as well as girls, so they're behind at every single level. And you can see that from the top end as well, university entry, through to large numbers of young men who are unemployed, not in education, employment, or training. So at both ends of the telescope, if you like, boys are not doing as well as they should be. And they see that and they feel that in the classroom and in society. So what it means is that there's this air of despondency among so many young men where they feel that they're not able to get on, they're not learning as much as possible. Some of them don't see where the jobs are, and jobs are really important for young men to see how they can get into work and then get on in life. And also, I think that there's this general narrative that boys are seen as a problem, and they're not seen as someone or some people to be celebrated and also to be pushed, and that they feel that society's gaze is looking at them to check whether they are misogynistic, whether they are causing problems to themselves and also to others. So they feel as though they're under the microscope, but also they feel that no one's really helping them.
I mean, interestingly, you probably saw it. The Education Secretary, Bridget Phillipson, recently warned of a sort of misogyny gripping the schools, and there's new guidance to help teachers spot signs of incel culture or the manosphere. Do you think that is a real problem among boys? And what does it look like if it is there in sort of classrooms and homes and youth centres? Is it?
Well, I think it is a problem, but also, and this is part of how boys feel that they're under this microscope. It is a problem for some boys, but not for all boys. And actually, a lot of the young men who are, and the research is showing this, is who engage or see some of this misogynistic um, content actually think the people producing it, the majority of the boys who feel that the people producing it are idiots. So they might be seeing it, but don't underestimate how smart teenage boys are in actually being able to critically think and look at this material and think, well, this guy, these people are idiots. So they might see it, but it doesn't mean to say they act on it. Also, what's really important is that a lot of them are looking for content online that will help them with their self-development, talking about how to live, physical health, mental health, how to get into work, how to get on in life. So a lot of the online content generally that boys and young men are looking for is to how to get on in life. So it's not always a problem. I think the bigger problem area is the number of boys who are displaying some of those misogynistic issues that they're seeing online and displaying them in the classroom, but also issues around their access to pornography, which I think there's a growing realization about how damaging that is to young men. Um, and also how damaging it, of course, is to young women. And I think there's a lot more research now taking hold around pornography, also around gambling. And part of the issue online is that this issue about algorithms. So the more you look at this content online, the more that content is then pushed towards you, and that's creating creating a significant problem as well. So they may click on a link and see something, and then an hour later they're getting five more posts, similar posts, being pushed onto them. But it is a problem for some, but not for all. And the issue, I think, and we're seeing that, is that all boys think that actually the whole of society thinks that they're, misogynists in waiting. And we saw that with some of the outcome on adolescence, for example, where certainly the initial reaction was like, all, teenage boys are looking at this content and then acting it out,
And you
when
felt
actually reality is that they're not. But also a lot of the boys just felt they were being picked on.
it's really hard to know how widespread it is, isn't it? And if you've got the algorithms
Mm.
feeding this kind of culture or these ideas, I mean, some of the loudest voices in this space is from sort of Andrew Tate, perhaps even Jordan Peterson.
Mm.
They say they're helping young men sort of build confidence and purpose. But then if they're doing that at the same time as promoting kind of hostility towards women or misogynistic ideas, how do we know, or how do we stop men and young boys sort of sliding towards those ideas? It's really difficult, isn't it?
It is difficult, but it's doable, and that's the thing. So I mean, there's a lot of work going on at the moment from lots of organisations producing similar content, um, apart from the misogyny, but similar positive, proactive content, talking about self-development. So actually, that there is good, healthy content for those boys looking for that type of information. And I think some of the problems been is that being as Andrew Tate and others have been the only ones producing content like that. So there's been a big move, lots of organizations doing that. I think there is an issue, and I think it's really, parents have a responsibility to be aware of what their kids are looking at online. And it's quite interesting. I spoke to some school teachers recently who are, and there's a big move to ban mobiles from school, etc. And one head teacher I spoke to said, well, the problem isn't about mobile phones and social media in school, it's what happens out of school. So obviously the schools can, inverted commas, police it between 9 till 4, but most of the problems online happen outside of school, and the schools pick up the pieces when the kids come back into school in the morning. So often it's schools is the easy option, but actually the more responsibility is on parents, also on the online companies, critical thinking, and also just encouraging boys to look at healthy content. The last point is that boys need to get outside. And so it's really important that boys have other distractions. So lots of civic groups, scouts, cubs, for example, sports clubs, other types of societies and groups. It's really important, cadets, to get boys outside and also distracted so that they're not sitting at home all of the time on their phones. And so again, it's, the parents, the communities getting boys outside and not sitting in front of their phone all of the time.
I mean, you've also said that when we ignore boys' struggles, there other people fill the gap. And
Mm.
so I think in one interview you suggested schools bear some responsibility for this rise in misogynistic online content. Do you think that there's a problem with not that boys don't feel listened to or taken seriously enough? And can you talk about that?
Yeah, well, I think the issue around the schools is about schools, not all schools as ever, and not all teachers, but there's an issue about the lack of male role models in school. So lack of male teachers. So only 1 in 4 school teachers are actually male. And that's in the UK, but it's similar patterns across the world. There's more teachers, if you like, in post 11 and older schools, but actually less at 10 and under. So even there's some big changes, and boys that don't have positive male role models in their lives, they haven't got a dad or a present dad or an active stepdad, haven't got any male leaders in their like neighborhood, haven't got male leaders in schools, then they haven't got anybody to actually uh, to hook up in terms of understanding what it means to be a man, what it means to be, what the guardrails are for being a man, what the framework is, and what the encouragement is. And young men will look to other men for that guidance. It's like it's almost inbuilt in men young men to look for other men for guidance about how to be a man. And therefore, if they're not there, that is a problem. Also, some of the things we found was that schools aren't doing as well as getting boys through exams and educated as they might be. We need more investment in the whole kind of vocational skills, learning trades, for example, and also that we're finding generally that boys are not pushed enough to actually excel. A lot of schools, or some of the teachers we found, were just pleased that boys turned up, not pleased that they turned up and did their homework, for example. And so boys need to be pushed, but also they need to understand the point of learning, where it can get them, and also to be celebrated when they do really well. So I wouldn't say schools necessarily are responsible for the misogynistic content and boys going that way, but they're part of the issue about we need to do more for boys and young men to help them get on. If they think they're on the up, they think they're moving positively in the world, they're not going to be looking for answers online or elsewhere, which are actually going to poison their mind.
When you say one of the things we found, are you talking about some work you've done?
Yeah, so I've done some research a couple of years ago with a range of schools where they had no attainment gap. So basically, the boys were doing as well as the girls. And I spoke to a number of the head teachers, and that's what they were saying about pushing boys, helping boys with their literacy. So boys, when they go to school, even at very early ages, are behind girls in terms of their reading and writing, and also being able to express themselves. As somebody said, they just know less words when they go to school than girls. So they're all forever trying to catch up. So a lot of the schools and closing that attainment gap and really pushing the boys were dealing with the fact that they weren't reading and writing enough. And so therefore they were encouraging boys to do that. So it enabled them to catch up. In addition, they were showing why it was important for boys to learn. So if you wanted to be a plumber, for example, you need to know your math, for example. If you want to be, go to university, you need to like really study hard and focus on studying hard. And also, if you wanted to look at different jobs, say nursing, caring professions, opening up those opportunities for those young men. But all of them needed to know why they were in school, because if they're at 14 and they're feeling, well, what's the point of being here? Then that really acts as a barrier for them to get on. And again, they will then look for other ways and means online about how they can get on in life. And sometimes that's in the physical world as well. So you'll see some boys joining gangs, for example, and what they're doing there is looking for a way to get on in life.
Yeah. Do you think, though, that the idea of toxic masculinity has gone too far and that it risks sort of teaching boys to see themselves as a problem or other people to assume they're a problem, and that the message kind of drives some people towards that online space and towards thinking differently about themselves?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, phrases like toxic masculinity are actually toxic. I mean, they are not helpful at all. Also, when you see endless discussions about what masculinity is, what it is to be a man today, endless discussions about the patriarchy, it's just navel gazing. What boys and young men need are the nuts and bolts of life, and that means possibilities. What can they do? Pathways on how to get there, and care. And what I mean by care is a society and the people around them being on their side, helping them if they need that support, and basically championing them and all of their male friends about what great men they are. The tools, the pathways, and the care. That's what they need. Not being told they're somehow toxic, that they're a problem. And if only you were like women or girls, that just doesn't work. And I'll be honest, of all the groups in the world, it doesn't work. It doesn't work with teenage boys.
No. Okay. So if you were designing a classroom conversation or a conversation in the home about masculinity, what do you think you'd want boys and girls to hear instead?
Well, I think what you would want to hear in terms of what if you were building those classrooms, and there's some great organisations actually doing some really good work on this, but I think it's acknowledging the problems that some boys have. And actually talking to them about those problems that they have, but listening and then actually acting on those problems. And secondly, just giving them the tools to basically get on and the class in the classroom, understanding why they are there and that you're on their side as teachers and as schools to enable them to get on and learn. The boys need to understand what the point of learning is, but also they need a level of respect. And teenage boys need to feel that they're being respected by the people within the schools and within society generally. So it comes back to that respect, giving them the tools and actually really pushing them.
Some of the problems, I mean, you've talked about a sort of quiet loneliness among boys. Do you think that their boys have become to feel ashamed of themselves and just sort of hiding away because they don't dare portray what might be seen as masculine traits? Do you think there's a problem with that? They're sort of becoming shamed.
Yeah, yeah, there is, and there is part of this societal issue. You know, that boys are seen as a problem, and there's a whole level of self-harm that's happening, and it comes out in two ways. There's the kind of self-harm which you can see some boys get involved in violence, gangs, for example, which are like far more visible. And then there's more kind of self-harm, which is behind their closed doors. So some of that could be physical self-harm. Some of that could be around body image as well. And then self-harm getting into gambling, pornography, and also like unhealthy communities online. There's lots of very healthy communities online, but getting sucked into the unhealthy ones. And there's something called something that started a lot of people talking about is sedation. And what I mean by that is that even if you looked at 20 years ago, growing level of young men being disillusioned with life, being unemployed, not thinking that there's any future or hope, and there'd be riots on the streets. 20 years, a lot of that is still happening, but there's no riots. And what some academics are looking at is actually the response, the generational response is different. So 20 years ago, there'd be, riots on the streets, etc., high streets and violence, and what have you. But actually now the boys are just giving in and giving up. They're checking out and they're sitting in their bedrooms or just with a few
Yeah.
mates and they're all in a world of despondency
Yeah.
between themselves. So they're not out rioting, they're just in the bedroom sitting on their own or with groups. But it's the same type of symptom and cause, which is actually it's a similar cause, but the expression of the symptoms are in a different way. Sitting in their bedrooms, lonely, isolated, boys in their basement. 20 years ago, they would be out rioting.
And I mean, maybe it's too much for this, but do you have any ideas why that flipped and why they aren't out rioting or causing disruption?
Well, I think a number of areas. I think COVID has had a huge impact.
I
That
mean, the lockdown.
yeah,
Yeah,
lockdown, the kind of 18 months, 2 year period has had a significant impact on girls as well as boys. And I think for generations around that, they were literally sedated at home. I mean, they couldn't go out, couldn't go to school, for example, couldn't leave a normal life. And we're seeing some of the outcome of that. I think also, I think the the other reasons is basically that they feel there's no point. So there's no point going out rioting, etc., because um, uh, it's not going to get them anywhere. So, and actually, it's going to get them into prison and
yeah,
in crime. And also, I just don't think that there's because of that. I just don't think there's a collective will to do that
mm,
type of behaviour. So I think this is sedation issue. I mean, I think it's just. Uh,
yeah,
it's easier for them to check out than
yeah,
try and actually fight the establishment, which is what was happening 20 years ago and more.
yeah. One of the most tragic things that we've talked about, or tragic outcomes of male distress, is suicide. And
Mm.
isn't it? You've said men still make up about three-quarters of suicides in the UK. And so just really wanting to ask, I don't know about the demographic of that, the age group, but it's young men as well, isn't it? A large proportion. But why are so many men reaching a crisis point before asking for help? And also, what warning signs can carers and parents look out for in boys and young men?
Well, it's suicide is the biggest killer of men, broadly for men under 45, 50. Changes in different countries, but broadly, that is situation. And the biggest area is around middle-aged men, so it's around 45 to 55-year-olds. But what we are seeing is a gradual increase at the younger age group in terms of teenage boys, but also younger men who are like 18 to 24 for example. And I think from again some of the research, it's about that they feel a sense of hopelessness, worthlessness, and they don't know what to do about any of that. They feel that actually there's no point in going on, and that they have some of them will have a range of life problems that they can't actually fix. And so, broadly, for men who take their own life, it's because they've got life problems they can't fix. So it's not in the traditional health sense, a mental health or a clinical health problem in their mind. It's just a life problem, and that's where they end up going down that path, often triggered by things like relationship breakdown, financial problems, employment problems, and also transitions. What I mean by that, sudden unemployment, coming out the armed forces, isolation around rural communities, and also you see that, and sometimes with some younger men going to university, for example, the upheaval in that can be quite significant. But it's a life problem that they face, and we're seeing more young men find that because again, far too many young men not in work. Want to get on in life, they might see their friends and others in their communities getting on, but they're not, and therefore they're looking at things and saying, "Well, what's the point?" Our job is to make sure that they know there is a point.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, are there barriers, or what are the barriers to men seeking and getting help?
Well, I think there's two aspects. It's the problems that cause um, uh, suicide. So issues about lack of support and understanding, especially on relationship breakdowns, especially if they've been quite significant relationships. There's all the issues around economic problems, debt advice, for example, and also problems just about unemployment. So we often see that when there's been a recession, an economic downturn over the next couple of years, you'll see male suicide start to increase. So one of the issues is about work. Work gives men purpose, and therefore, when there are mass redundancies in a particular area, that will have an effect. But often, the only support available is support to try and get another job. There isn't enough support around the kind of mental health and counselling, which comes with those transitions. So it's about addressing and looking at the causes of those problems, and then helping men get out of those problems that they're in.
Is there a kind of stigma or pride attached to men seeking help, do you think, or young boys, or not knowing
Um,
what to turn?
there is, but it's not caused by men themselves. And I mean, there's a great line around that if there's a lake full of fish and a couple are dead, then you look at the fish, those particular fish. But if there's a lake and all of the fish are dead, you look at what's happening in the lake. And basically, what we're seeing around those issues is about what's going on in terms of men not talking. Well, it's a myth. They just talk in a different way. So especially with other men, they would talk shoulder to shoulder, activity based. They would talk by doing. Um, but also, there isn't always the support available. There isn't the mental health support where they live or where they work, or in the time when it's available when they actually need it. And also the key thing is that men do talk, but if you're not going to act or you're not going to listen, and there's consequences for men talking, then actually they won't talk. And there's been issues about some complaints, or when men want to talk, it places an additional burden, say, on their female partner. You can't have it both ways. You can't say men don't talk and then when they do, it's a problem. And also, when I talk about consequence-free conversations, especially in a work setting, if you tell, your boss or manager that you've got a mental health problem, or there's some stuff going on at home which is causing you like distress, if they don't take you seriously, then you're not going to talk anymore or talk at all. So if you have a really bad work culture, lack of values, and that can be a real barrier. And also for older men, if they've got a physical or mental health problem, and the physical health problem will affect their ability to do a job, especially if it's a job outside. And if they do tell somebody, and it could mean they'll have their job taken away, they won't say anything. Because it affects them, but also it affects their family and their homes. So it's important for men to be able to have consequence-free conversations.
Yeah. Do you think that a lot of men are expressing pain and self-loathing really by going online and sort of looking at online misogyny and sort of affiliating with it? Do you think that's also about self-hatred too?
Yeah, well, yeah, yes, it is, and it's not all; it's a minority. I mean, and
Yeah.
this is part of the narrative. It's like you coming out of adolescence. I come back to that. You would think
So
every 13-year-old boy is like looking at misogynistic content 24/7. That was kind of the impression and the debate, and it's just not happening.
do we
Some
know the scale of it though? Have we any idea? Has
Well,
anyone?
well, well. I mean, there's some research that's been done that says about 60% of boys look at it regularly, or but actually, it doesn't mean to say that they're actually. And the research is not saying that they're actually then acting on it. And so they may see it because it comes up in their algorithms, but they doesn't mean to say that they're actually taking it seriously.
But
So I
we
think.
don't know how many are taking it seriously or not. That's really hard, isn't it? To
Yeah, it is. It is, but a lot of the research is actually saying that they are looking at it, but they're actually not taking it
Yeah.
serious.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
again, I mean, there's some research I saw recently about just about Andrew Tate, for example, and I think the research said that for young boys, it was like at least 80% of them thought he was who had seen his content thought he was an idiot. You
Okay.
know,
So
so
difficult to, yeah, isn't it?
yeah, so and that's how
Yeah.
teenage
Yeah.
boys expressed it,
Yeah.
probably with a few swear words in that as well. But nonetheless, so again, it's about focusing on those particular boys, but giving them that hope, etc.
Yeah.
But I think with older men, again, there'll be some men, some of those men will be already predisposed to that type of content. So,
Yeah.
you know, you know,
Yeah.
there's always been a small minority of men who've always been a problem, whether it's
Yeah.
football hooliganism, whether it's in, like extremist political groups or whatever. So, that's always been an issue. That's always been with us. Some more men will be drawn into some of that, probably more so things like pornography
Yeah.
than anything else, which is perhaps well wasn't as accessible as it is now.
And so, if a parent or carer is worried about a teenager or young boy in their rooms, withdrawn, angry, not sure what they're doing, suspecting that they may be looking at pornography or watching misogynistic content online, what is the first conversation they need to have? How do they approach that? Because obviously, youngsters will be secretive perhaps about this.
Yeah, well, I think it's asking them how they are, how they feel that how things are at school, how things are at life, and what can you do to get them on the front foot. So the key thing is for them to feel as though that you're not on their case, but that you're on their side, and actually, as a parent, put your arm around them and keep celebrating them and keep saying how great they are and what can you do to help. That is a key thing. Have that level of inquiry, but
Yeah.
don't push it all of the time because again, teenage boys, if they feel that you're on their case, that will make things worse.
I mean, a lot of times boys may just sort of hide behind humor or bravado and will be very secretive. And there is a number of boys I even know about that just are not coming out of their bedrooms, not engaging with society. You can keep boosting and boosting, but I hear parents say, well, I don't know what to boost anymore because I can't get them to do anything. How does one tackle those really entrenched habits, I suppose, or perhaps even addictions that are going on?
Well, I think the key issue is just keep at it. I think keep at it. And, some boys will grow out of it, find out what's going on in school, for example. I mean, all the things that these parents will be doing, but it is keeping at it and actually keep pushing them to succeed, but also making sure, importantly, that you're on their side, especially getting them outdoors, I think is really important. And some of the work that's been going on around the world is looking at how we can get more boys outside.
Yeah. And if they say, well, I just want to watch this pornography, or I'm really interested in watching Andrew Tate and I agree with a lot of things he says or whatever, do you have a conversation about what your reservations are, or how does a parent deal with that?
Yeah, yeah, you have those conversations, one-to-one conversations, and have examples of have it's about being those mentors, whether you're a mother or a father or a carer, whatever role it is actually showing them, not just telling them it's wrong, but you've got to show them and explain them and give them alternatives as to why that content is wrong, for example. And ultimately, as a parent, you can just um limit their screen time.
So you would challenge it. You would say, this is not right. I
Yeah,
disagree.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you're getting to the point where you're trying everything and then it's starting to get to that point, yeah, you have to challenge it. You also, it isn't just responsibility that you have and also responsibility to your son, but it's also a responsibility to, wider society, especially if some of the things that they're doing or may be drawn to are actually going to harm others. So actually, you have a responsibility to other people that they may interact with. And certainly, there's been questions have been asked about, certain terrible things that some teenage boys have done, and a lot of people are saying, "Well, what were the parents doing?" So,
yeah,
and it's questions have been asked of the parents of some of these things about, you have a responsibility to your son, but also you have a wider responsibility to making sure that your son isn't causing harm to others, and you as a parent or carer have that responsibility as well.
but we discussed earlier how some of the messages on these online influencers are very healthy. So you wouldn't just say, well, you can't watch that at all. You would say, well, this is useful, but I don't like this bit. You cherry pick it, would you, and just be
Yeah,
very,
yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, absolutely. Because as I said, there's a lot of good content. There's a lot of good content out there. So basically, it isn't all bad. There's lots of great podcasts and videos, often made by young men for men. Lots of really good influence out there, really talking up, in a very positive sense about personal development, and also, how to get a job, how to get a girlfriend, boyfriend, or what have you. So there is good content out there, and it's about finding that content and steering it towards the boys.
yeah. I was thinking more about some of the online influencers that have been described as misogynistic. They also have useful ideas about fitness and health and ambition. So, would you say to boys, you can't watch that person because of their other views that I don't agree with, if you didn't agree with them? Or would you sort of try and have a conversation about what's good and what's bad? Or just try and steer them into another direction altogether and look for more kind of uniformly healthy influences and online content?
Yeah, I would steer them completely away from it. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Because as I said, although a lot of boys, most teenage boys are critical thinkers, and they will think, well, 80% of what you said was great. The other 20% was just like, anti-women and just wrong. Because like the vast majority of boys are very pro-women and
Yeah,
girls, and so, but why take that risk? So it's better to steer them towards more positive content. And as I said, there's been a real wake up in the last couple of years where it was always about, well, you can't watch this, but actually there weren't any alternatives, and that's what's now changing.
understood. And do you think schools are confident enough to discuss these issues openly? Do you think they've caught up with what's happening, or has a sort of fear of being labelled anti-feminist sort of closing down conversations there around this?
I mean, this new guidance has come out, and it's been very clear about not blaming all boys, and that recognizing boys will be boys, but not in a, you shouldn't punish boys for being a boy. And it's not all boys, but you should be looking at problematic boys, i.e., if you're in a class of 30 boys, two or three of problematic attitudes towards women, etc., well, you deal with those three boys. I mean, a good example. So I spoke to a head teacher a few months ago. Some of his boys in his school had been caught by the police, had been shoplifting. And the police went to the head teacher and said, I want to get up in an assembly, get all your boys in assembly, and I will get up and speak to them and tell them all not to be shoplifters. The head teacher said, absolutely not, because the vast, vast, vast majority of my boys are not shoplifters. Give me the footage of the boys who were shoplifting, and I'll tell you who they are, and then you can deal with them in the way that the police have to deal with them, but not. There's no way you're coming into my school to tell all boys they're shoplifters, because
Mm.
the 97 out of the 100 boys who aren't shoplifters will feel picked upon, they will feel offended, and actually it will prove to them once again that they're all seen as a problem. So you deal with the problem boys, not all boys.
Do you think society talks enough about sort of the empathy and the caring side of boys and young men as a strength rather than something that should be associated with girls and women?
No, I completely agree. They don't talk about that as well. And often there's a kind of flip side to, the debates around masculinity and femininity, because, kind of masculine traits, which lots of women have as well. It's like not as though like, women don't have masculine traits or men don't have feminine traits. It's quite polarized, the whole discussion. But when you're looking at more feminine traits, saying care, for example, well, boys have them, but it's expressed often in a different way. So masculinity, the reflection of femininity in terms of care is boys, young men wanting to be of service to others. So really, we've moved away from being the kind of um, provider protector role, but we are looking at we've moved away from that, but also we've started to use that phrase, but we've tended to use the word at service. So I think that that's a really important point to reflect on that. So I think I think that's really important. So, is there anything else, just in case
Yeah.
uh, the computer switches off?
Okay. Well, I was just going to ask some of the unique challenges and rewards for foster or adopted fathers. Just that, really.
I think some of the rewards for foster fathers is basically that sense of service. The boys will really look up to you. They will feel that they're on your side, that you're on their side, and you will help them get on in life. And that's what boys need. They need to feel people on their side and that somebody's giving them the tools to get on in life.
So, finally, final question, Mark. What gives you hope that this generation of boys and men can find a sort of healthier and happier way to express themselves?
How they will get on and express themselves is basically, I am hopeful because we're having this conversation. Society's woken up to the problems and challenges boys have, and we're all starting to look at what the solutions are. So that's why I'm hopeful, because we're talking and we're starting to act.
Brilliant. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you. Thank you so much for your insights, deep insights there. And yeah, this has been Family Talks, and we look forward to seeing you next time.